Welcome to The Village, a new podcast focusing on the students, staff, and community members that make Village Elementary unique. I'm one of your hosts, Chelsea Evans.
And I'm Jacob Kucha, your other host. We're coming to you today from my room in D-Wing at Village Elementary. The podcast has been sent out to our school media accounts, and it's been emailed to all of our parents and guardians. And thanks to everybody who's listening and supporting us. We've heard good feedback, really encouraging feedback that makes us keep showing up to do this for everybody who's out there. We're still wanting to hear from all of our artists and musicians about jingles and songs and anybody who wants to contribute to our album cover and or make an introduction for us.
Yes, and don't forget to visit our website, The Village, where you can listen to all of our episodes and check out the extra content for more on what we talk about on each episode. We have received a lot of great feedback, like Mr. Kucha said, and one of the biggest themes that I heard was that people really felt inspired by Mr. Battenfield. And we have another guest today who is definitely an inspiration to me personally. Every time I have a conversation with him, I learn something new, and I'm always so captivated by what he has to say. I look forward to talking with him whenever I get the chance. Mr. Kucha, you had the pleasure of working with him for several years in the same grade level. Do you have anything to add to that?
You know when you meet somebody and you just think, gosh, if I could be like that for the rest of my life? This is that kind of guy. No bad words, no bad reviews. Nobody ever has anything negative to say about our next guest. He's a hard worker, a loyal guy, and kind of like Mr. Battenfield, there's always follow through. And so here he is, late into the evening on a Monday, ready to be interviewed for everybody to get another dose of what makes Village a special place. So, without further ado, the one, the only, the Mr. Juan Ramirez. Welcome.
Thank you very much. A little pressure on me this time around after listening to Mr. Battenfield. It's a tough act to follow.
That's without a doubt. But if there's anybody who's up to it, it's probably you. And did you notice that he was nodding his head when you mentioned that Mr. Battenfield was inspirational?
I did notice that.
So someone as inspirational as Juan Ramirez even needs inspired.
Can also be inspired,
Wow.
yeah. And how lucky are we that we have both of them on our staff that we get to work with on a regular basis.
Yep, totally agree. So, Mr. Ramirez, we're going to start with a little bit of background. One, not only are you a staple in Emporia, but you're not originally from here. So kind of give us your background about, I don't know, maybe college, and then how did you end up in Kansas, and whatever else you think might be pertinent.
Well, you're right. I am not from Emporia. In fact, I was born a long ways from here. I was born in Mexico, the northern part of Mexico to be exact, but I grew up in the central part. My family moved to the United States when I was 13. We moved to a small town in western Kansas, Lewis, Kansas, and that's where I went to junior high and high school. After that, I went to school at Fort Hays State University, and that's where I graduated with my teaching degree. And then I spent my first 5 years teaching in Dodge City before my family, my wife in particular, moved us here to Emporia, and I've been here ever since.
If we were to take a deep dive on growing up in Mexico, can you just kind of give us a snapshot on what life was like then?
Well, it's very different than what we're used to here. My school was very different. We did not have computers. We did not have state-of-the-art classrooms or anything like that. In fact, none of the teachers that we had in my hometown were from there. They all traveled. And so we never knew when school was going to start. It was supposed to start 8 o'clock, but really it started when the teachers got there. Sometimes it was 9, sometimes it was 10, but we were always done by 1 o'clock because that's when school ended. And that's where I went for elementary school all the way up to my 6th grade year. My 7th grade year, that's sort of when you go to a different school. So elementary goes from 1st to 6th grade, and then you go to your secondary school, and that would be 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And so my 7th grade year, I got to go to a different school. And I was supposed to do three years there. Then, but at the end of the first year, my parents told me we were moving, and we did. And so that was one of the things that Oh, disappointed with my parents. I met some good friends that first year at the new school, and I was counting on being back with that group for that at least in the following 2 years, and we never did. We moved to the United States, and we just never went back.
Now, I might be splitting hairs here, but when they said that you were going to move as a family, did they just say we're moving and leave it there, or did they say we're going to America?
No, they never said anything to us about it. We never traveled anywhere in Mexico. And so when they first said we were going to travel, I was excited about it. But never did I imagine that we were never going to go back. So it was a very difficult move for us. Also, I have some siblings, and when we first made the move to the United States, they stayed behind. It was my parents and myself that came to the United States, and my brothers and sisters stayed behind with my grandparents. And we were separated for about 6 months before we were reunited in the United States. So that added to the challenge.
And so, sorry to be a question hog here, Miss Evans. So what was the timeline like between them announcing that you're moving and you had actually moved, and then are you able to tell us why you were the one that came to the United States first?
Well, I'm the oldest in my family, and my dad had been to the United States, and his dream was that he wanted me to come to the United States, learn English, and then go back to Mexico. And me being the oldest was the one that was chosen to make the trip, but it was never meant to be a trip where we were going to permanently move to the United States. It was going to be just an opportunity for me to learn the language so that once I went back to Mexico, maybe that would open some opportunities for me having a second language. But everything changed. Everything changed. I'm not even sure that my parents ever thought that we were going to be where we're at now. So.
Wow. And so how long was it between them saying we're going to move and then bag was packed, I'm assuming, and you were moving? How long was that period?
We're talking a matter of weeks. School ended probably in August there, because the school's a bit off than it is here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And they told me we were moving, and it wasn't like we moved straight to the United States. There was a whole process that I don't think a lot of people understand. When people move, it's not just a matter of, oh yeah, we're going to do that. We had to get passports, and that took a long time, and that was a little bit of traveling within Mexico. And then by the time we got our documents, it was probably, I'm going to guess probably a 4 or 5 months. Really? At times we stayed with friends, we stayed with relatives in Juarez, which is the border city from El Paso. My dad knew some friends, and he asked if we could stay there while we were trying to get all our visas and everything else. And so we stayed with friends to my dad, but complete strangers to me. Mm-hmm. And so, and again, missing my brothers and sisters, it was a difficult time.
So when you said you packed a bag and you didn't know you weren't necessarily coming back, what were you able to take with you? How much were you able to bring? How did you prepare for that?
Well, I didn't prepare anything. Like I said, I was not told about this. So no, the bag had a couple changes of clothes. We didn't have much to begin with. And there wasn't anything that I was necessarily attached to that I had to have with me. So it was just some clothes. It's all that I brought with us. I wish that I would have brought other things, pictures and things like that, because those were some things that after we moved, the people that stayed in our house did not take good care of it. And, the windows to the house were broken. We had chickens and ducks in our backyard, and in time they made their way into the house. And so the first time that we went back, it was so disappointing to see our furniture, so many of the things that we left behind were destroyed by either animals or the weather and everything else. And so we don't have a lot of pictures. And so that's the one thing that I wish that I could have kept and brought with us, but we really didn't bring much other than the clothes on our backs, basically.
I can't even imagine. And
I can't. I mean, there's so much to unpack.
right, I'm trying to wrap my head around, trying to put myself in your shoes and understand what that could have been like. I imagine it was scary and sad. And were you at all excited, or were you more focused on what you were losing than the opportunity you might be gaining?
No, I think at the beginning, like I said, we never traveled anywhere. So I was excited to have the opportunity to see something different. But then once I realized that there was a possibility I was not going to go back, that we were not going to go back, I think that's when the scary part set in. Then you realize that you're not prepared for the move. You're going to a place that you've never been to. You're going to be meeting people that you have never met before. You're going to leave everything that you know behind. And so it is pretty scary. The not knowing what awaits you was very difficult.
So what point did you realize, or were you told that it might be a possibility you weren't going back? Was that before you got to the United States, or was that during the midst of all this traveling and getting paperwork done?
No, I think when I finally realized it is when we were in the United States. At that point, my parents started talking about bringing my siblings, and that's when I started realizing that, no, this is going to be a permanent move. We're not going to get a chance to go back.
So when you went through the whole process of staying in Juarez and then moving north, was it going straight from there to Lewis? I guess from that part of the journey, how did you end up crossing the border and then in little old Lewis, Kansas?
Well, like I said, my dad had come to the United States during the 70s. He was one of those people that got hired as migrant workers. And so when he first came to the United States, he came to California, and he had a permit to cross into the United States. Now, eventually they got rid of those programs, and he went back to Mexico and then came back illegally. And during that time, he traveled to different places in the United States. He worked a little bit in Texas. He worked a little bit in Oklahoma, and in time ended up in Lewis. Okay, they have a hydraulic cylinder plant. They built hydraulic cylinders there, and that was one of my first jobs in America, working at that place. But he worked there, and I had an uncle that had come with my dad and had stayed in Lewis. And so that's when it was time for us to come to the United States, we went to where my uncle was. And so that's what brought us to Lewis.
And so how was your family received once you got to Lewis and settled in, and how did that go?
It was a good experience in that sense. It's a small town, in small town America. There's going to be problems in some cases, but in my case, it was very positive. The people were very welcoming. Some of the things that were more of a challenge, it was a small town, and at that time, we're talking 1989, there was no such thing as programs designed for students like me, for students moving from a different country and that didn't speak English. And so even though I was 13 and I had finished my 7th grade in Mexico, I was moved back to 6th grade. Again, there was no ESL program. There was no one that could help me. And there was a kid in 6th grade that spoke Spanish. And so they thought that this would be a way to help me. So I lost a couple years.
I was going to say, so that's 2 years?
Yeah. I was 20 years old when I graduated from high school.
Oh, I forgot about that. I think you said that before.
There was 2 years that I lost. But aside from that, my experience in Lewis was good. I met some really good teachers, met some good friends, and that's actually where my desire, I guess, to go into the education field was born. I had a really good teacher, Mrs. Richard. She was my sixth grade teacher. She didn't speak any Spanish, but yet I knew this lady cared about me, and she tried so hard. I still have a journal that we kept because we used to write to her, and she would write us back. And again, there wasn't a whole lot of understanding of each other than I knew. I mean, you don't have to have the words to show someone that you care about them. And this was the lady that made a difference for me. After that year and after working with her, I knew that this is something that I wanted to do. I wanted to do that for somebody else. I wanted to help someone that maybe was in my same situation. And I knew that teachers could be those people, that they could make a difference. So she inspired me personally, but then, like I said, she showed me how one person can make a difference. And so that's where it started, like I said, in Lewis. Lots of good experiences. I've got a chance to play sports, to get involved. I was welcomed by the community. I was lucky in that sense.
That's good. Real quick, before we move on from that, a student in my class wrote this question for you. She said, "Who was the first person to talk to you at school? Do you remember that? Or was it the student that was in your sixth grade class who spoke Spanish?"
No, it wasn't him, because actually he didn't like to speak Spanish.
Oh.
That was one of the things that the teachers all thought it would be great, but he didn't. He did not feel comfortable speaking Spanish. And he helped me in the sense that he did all my work for me. It's what would happen is, instead of explaining things to me, he would just say, "Here you go," and I would copy all his work, and that's how I got through my sixth grade year. So no, I think that the first person that welcomed me into the school was another teacher, Mrs. Waldron. I still keep in touch with her, and same thing. They're just the kind of people that just by talking to them, they just give you the sense that they're kind and helpful. And so, yeah, those were my first couple of experiences.
I could imagine that this experience for you could be pretty isolating. And while your story is definitely unique to us, not having been through that, we have students in our building who are going through that exact same thing right now. So one of them asked if you could give one piece of advice to an immigrant student, what would that be?
Yeah, it was definitely, one of those experiences that shakes your confidence. I didn't know, about a year and a half ago, I met with Mrs. Richards out here in Ottawa, and she was reminding me about my first day in school. And I learned through her that my first day of school, I ran away from school. I apparently was so frustrated with everything that was going on. It was so overwhelming that I took off running, and I went home in the middle of the day.
Wow. And you didn't remember that?
I had forgotten about that experience until she told me about it.
Wow.
And then once she told me about it, it's like, yeah, I remember.
All came back, yeah.
But, my advice to them is there's going to be challenges, but there's also going to be opportunities. And you need to take advantage of those opportunities. You need to let people help you. And that's where one of the, like I said, I was lucky enough that there was people willing to help me, and I took those opportunities. And then the other is you still have to do your part. You can't expect everyone to take care of your every need. You have to understand that in order for things to get better, you have to work for it too. And that's, I think, the difference is when there's people that are willing to help you and give you opportunities, and you are willing to meet them and do your part, that's when you're going to be successful. And for me, it was a lot of hard work at the beginning, but I would say probably by the end of the first year in the United States, I was able to carry conversations. I was able to function academically. Now, one of the things that helped me academically is, as I said, I had finished 7th grade in Mexico, and I came back and I was doing 6th grade work. Well, I had already done some of that stuff. And so I was able to experience success perhaps a little bit sooner than some of these students that didn't have the academic background that I did. So in that sense, I was lucky as well. But again, the main thing is you have to to work. You have to do your part. You can't get discouraged. You have to keep, your goals in mind, and have to work at it. Like I said, let people help you if that's a possibility.
And I think that's a message, I think you would probably agree, for all of our students. Not just students who don't speak the same language as us, but every student has their own challenges that they're going to face. And if they have that mentality to meet people halfway, there's so many people out there that want to reach out and help them if they're just willing to accept it. So
it's a very good balance between accept help when you need it, but also you got to do the work. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard to say, you have to do both, and you have to know when to do both, but
and one of the things, as I've gotten older, I try to keep things in perspective. There was no reason for me not to be successful. I was healthy. I had a good mind. I had, the use of all my limbs. There was no reason why I shouldn't be successful. It wasn't easy, but, there's people that literally can't. They're born with a disability. It's a little more challenging for them. Whereas for me, it was a lot of it. I think it was a matter of me wanting to be successful, and I think that's a lot of the reason why people succeed is they believe in themselves and they have to work at it.
I think we asked Mr. Battenfield something along the lines of, like, so where did that come from? Like, were your parents that type of person where they just, it was up to them to make it work for their family and to give their family a better life? Or, how did that fire just always burn?
Well, I do think that there is a fire in all of us. Sometimes it's a little tougher to see. But in my case, it does come from my family. And it wasn't, because we were not the kind of family that would sit around and give affirmations to each other and that sort of thing. But I was very observant. I could see my parents working hard and doing this for us. And so I was afraid to fail them. I didn't want to. I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to reward them, I guess, for all the things that they had done for me. And so I think that's where a lot of my motivation comes from. And also, being the oldest in the family, I sort of felt the pressure to show my younger siblings that, this is what it was going to take. I just felt like, and again, I don't know that anybody told me that. I just felt that that's something that, as the oldest in the family, I needed to be the example for them to follow.
Well, I think a lot of this ties into the next question I have on my screen, which is talking about your spring break trip that you took to Mexico. And I guess give us the rundown of that and what made you go back over spring break, and you took your family, and what made it special, and why did you do that?
Well, this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. My son's a freshman. He still has a little bit of time with us, but I'm realizing just how quickly time flies. And here within a couple years, he's already talking about leaving the house and going to college. And I'm glad about that, but I also want to make sure that he remembers where we come from. Part of his heritage comes from Mexico, and I wanted him to see it. There's times when we sit around and I talk to him about some of my experiences as a kid, but it's hard for them to imagine. I wanted him to see the house where I grew up, the places where I worked, with my parents, where I learned to play soccer, all of that. And some of it is yes, because I want him to see those things, and some of it is so that he can appreciate what he has here. Because I grew up in a place that didn't have a lot of opportunities, and I want him to not lose sight of just how lucky he is of all the opportunities that he has here in the United States. So that was a lot of the reason why I wanted to take him there. it ended up being very, very sad, very difficult trip for me, just because you realize just how much things have changed. I know I have moved on, I have done other things, and you just sort of assume that everything's going to stay the same in the home country, and it's not. I went there hoping to see friends, hoping to see family, and this has been 30 years later, and things have changed. Some of the family, some of the neighbors that I was counting on and that I used to enjoy visiting, they're no longer there, or they're busy doing other things. So it's a very difficult trip, and along the way, I came to realize that. I took them so that they could see where I grew up, but then I also ended up realizing that there's not a whole lot there for them and even for me to go back to. It's just one of those things that, when I came back, I wanted to write down some of my feelings, because it's a very emotional trip for me, and I wanted to remember some of those things. And what better way to put it on Facebook so that it can remind you year after year? So I wanted to do that, and I tried to express some of those. And that was one of the things that, when I went, I didn't go to say goodbye, but it felt like that at the end. It's just one of those, it just becomes apparent that for everything that you gain here in the United States, all these great opportunities and all the great things, and I'm not complaining because I've done very well, I'm very happy, and I don't think that I could have scripted my life any better here. But at the same time, there's a lot that has been sacrificed. You lose family, you lose friends, and literally, like in my case, you lose your home. It didn't feel like home this last time that we went back.
Like, what a valuable opportunity, because it's like you said, like, it's good you went now instead of in 20 years when maybe you wouldn't have been able to convince yourself to go. Or maybe it's good that you went now instead of 10 or 15 years ago when, some of those things would have still been intact. And just is a good way to look at it.
And you kind of shared a little bit of your perception of what it was like there. What about your family? What was their experience like, or what did they share with you about taking that trip? And did you have the chance that you were looking for to show your son where you came from?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different, and that's the one thing that I have to give props to my wife and to my son, because it is so different. They're definitely not used to this, and yet they didn't complain. They just went along with whatever I asked them to do.
Because I'm assuming it's not resorts and pools and swimming up to the bar to get some refreshments. That's not the Mexico you were in.
Well, there are places like that in Mexico, and that's the thing that I think that I want people to understand. Mexico is got all of that. You have those places that are resorts, and life is just like here in the United States. Okay, and part of our trip was spent in a city like that, but where I wanted my family to see was definitely not like that.
I'm guessing a lot of poverty, or is it just availability of resources?
Well, Mexico, I think, I've always said that it's a nation of extremes. There's people that have a lot, and then there's people that don't have anything. Some of our pictures that we took, I think there's a picture that my wife took on one of the main roads where there's a gentleman riding a horse to get to his job. So there's still places like that where people are still walking. They're still using fairly, primitive farming tools and things like that. But then you also see, the fancy cars, the malls and things like that. So it is definitely a nation of extremes. We wanted to visit my old school, and at one point they were not going to let us in because of their protocols, but they did finally. We went with a friend, and she explained our situation, and they let us in. So we got to see the classrooms, and you could just see that, everything that we see here that we're saying, we need to get rid of it, it's no longer good, they're still using some of those things there. So definitely the poverty is one thing. But the other thing is, it's always been like that. It's always been like that, but yet that's some of the things that brings people closer together. We didn't have a whole lot in Mexico, but I never went hungry. And part of the reason is because whenever we would go to the neighbors, they always make sure that they fed you. And so everybody looked out for each other. And we got to experience that. This friend that we were staying with, she took us on a walking tour. And then when we got back to the house, we were planning to get back to our hotel. And she's like, no, you can't leave. First, you got to eat. And she cooked for us. And so very simple meal. But again, it just shows the kind of people that live there.
We do have a couple more questions about your trip from students and staff. And one of them was, did you find out anything interesting that you didn't know about where you came from or you had forgotten since you'd been there?
I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I was really looking forward to seeing is my sixth grade teacher in Mexico was also one that was very influential for me, and I wanted to look him up. And unfortunately, I was not able to do that, but I did reconnect with him. And so that was one of the things that I did enjoy. I also learned that there's been more additions to the old school. So just things like that. Mexico has changed, one, because of COVID. There's, always been, things with drug cartels and things like that. And I think that has changed the country. Normally, the town square, the plaza, that was the place to be. And there was always people late into the night, and music and businesses and things like that. And this time around, by 7:30, it seems like as soon as the sun goes down, the streets are empty. And that was something that was not the case. That's something that I don't remember when I lived there.
Well, to put a bow on some of these questions, Mr. Ramirez, how would you describe, or what would you say is your greatest accomplishment in life after everything you've been through and raising your family and all of that?
A lot of times when I think about the things that I'm proud of, I don't necessarily look at my personal accomplishments. I look more at my family. And that's one of the things that I've always been proud of. Growing up, my family was very important to me. Obviously, here in the United States, very proud of my wife and my son. And that really is what I'm proud of. I've been married now for 17 years. That's pretty good for somebody that was never in a relationship longer than a year. And so I'm very proud about that. And just seeing my son growing up and doing great things. He makes me proud. And personally for me is, I wanted to be a teacher from the time that I was in sixth grade. And I think I would say that that's probably my proudest accomplishment, just because that's what I set out to do. And I've been able to accomplish that. I've always felt in a way, I don't know if I'm just too overconfident about things, but I always felt that I could do anything that I set my mind to. But this was what I wanted to do, like I said, from the time that I was in sixth grade. So yeah, sometimes we joke about, how's your day going? Oh, just living the dream. Well, for me, it literally is. This is what I wanted to do from the time I was in sixth grade. So I'm proud that I've been able to reach that goal, and that I continue, doing what I like to do. And so hope that, I keep getting the opportunity to continue and maybe retire doing this someday.
Yeah. Well, we taught fourth grade together for a while, and now being a fifth grade teacher and having kids who were in your class the previous year, there is a certain sense of pride that comes out of that classroom. When I say, raise your hand if you had Ramirez last year, or I don't know if Mr. Ramirez talks about, they there's a certain characteristic that they have that they probably didn't have before they went in there. And I know that that's because your classroom management and you can just tell your, what am I trying to think of? Your passion and your enthusiasm for taking each day by the horns and making things work for your favor. You're passing that along to 20 kids a year, and so that's valuable.
Well, I think oftentimes I'm guilty of oversharing. My kids hear lots of stories, okay, but I do want to teach them, not just about the academics, but to try to teach them and to share my experiences with them, hoping that does make a difference. And that truth is also one of the things that I'm proud of, is that I've been teaching now long enough to see my former students going out into the world and doing the things that they wanted to do. And I think as a teacher, that's one of the things that really makes you happy. When you had someone that was in fifth grade and they wanted to do something that's grown up, and now they're doing that. The kid that was here with us, Izzy, that is working for the Life Flight team. Mm-hmm. I had him when he was non-English, when he was in fifth grade, and now he's living the dream and he's being successful and he's enjoying himself. So that's something that as teachers, I think it makes you feel good about what you do. And I know that the students that I have now, and I tell them that there's no reason why they can't be doing some of those same things. To dream be big, because they have all the tools and all the opportunities to achieve it. So it makes me proud to know that these guys are going to be out there being productive members of society here in a few years, because the world belongs to them. I tell them in a couple years, they're going to be the ones ruling the world.
I don't think we could script a better ending to that interview. Not. So thanks for your time on a Monday night, and thanks for doing what you do in the classroom next door.
Yeah, it definitely shows. As we said in the beginning of the episode, there's not a person in the building that has ever spoken an ill word about you, and that is just because of all these things you just showed to us today. So thank you so much for coming today and being you. And
thank you for having me. Like I said, like I was telling you about my teacher, sometimes it's not always about the teaching, it's the connections that you make with students. And so that's one of the things that I always try to do. Just let them know that, when they're in my classroom, they're going to be cared for, and I'm going to do my best. And if they're willing to do their best, we're going to be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Now that our interview is over, it's time for the Triple Scoop.
All right, here we are with arguably everyone's favorite part of the Triple Scoop. It's the rapid fire questions directed to Mr. Ramirez. So, Miss Evans, will you get us started?
Yep, just as a reminder, Mr. Ramirez, you just answer your first instinct, and here we go. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Strawberry.
Do you prefer summer or winter?
Oh, summer by far.
Casa Ramos, El Laredo, or Taco Bell?
El Laredo. Every Friday night, it's a family tradition.
Oh, I like it. What is your dream vacation in 10 seconds or less?
Well, I've discovered that I like traveling, but I still say different places in Mexico.
Cool.
Favorite movie, song, or book?
I like The Hunger Games. A silly one was the movie Necessary Roughness. It's a comedy with Sinbad. It's about a football team that was really horrible, and at the end they win their game, and it reminds me of my junior high years.
With Sinbad, that's a blast from the past. Are you a breakfast guy or a dinner guy?
Breakfast, probably.
Headphones or speakers?
Probably speakers. The louder, the better.
Favorite piece of playground equipment?
I would probably say the swings, but I was more of a, soccer ball kind of guy.
I was going to say, is a soccer goal or a basketball goal a piece of playground equipment?
I think it could be considered a piece of equipment.
Soccer goal, then.
Probably soccer.
Okay.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Probably night owl, but I don't really have a difficult time getting up early either. Not like 4 a.m, but usually I beat my alarm.
There you go. And lastly, what do you like most about Village Elementary?
I think the students. They're the ones that every day they bring a smile to my face because somebody's going to say or do something that makes me feel good about what we do and just how lucky we are to get a chance to work with them.
All right, you've successfully made it through the rapid fire questions and the triple scoop. Thanks once more, Mr. Ramirez.
And I'm definitely going to be checking out that Sinbad movie.
Necessary roughness.
Necessary roughness.
Unnecessary roughness kind of sounds like a foul to me, but it does lead us to our next scoop, which is the sports update. Now, today's sports update will be a little bit different than we usually have. I mentioned in a previous episode that I had a personal connection to one of the KU basketball players who I was cheering on in the tournament. I thought it would be kind of a special treat for our listeners if we got to hear from him. Now, since he just won a national championship and recently declared that he would be in the 2022 NBA draft, he has been very busy. We weren't able to get together in person, but I was able to send him some questions, and here is what he had to say. Everybody, Christian Brown.
What's up, Village Elementary? This is Christian Brown coming to you from Overland Park with a sports update, and I was asked to answer some questions for you guys. The first question is, when did you know that you love basketball? I wouldn't say that there was a specific date that I fell in love with basketball. I've always loved sports, and I played every sport pretty much growing up. So I've always just been, into sports and, being an athlete. So, like I said, I've just always loved, being outside, being on the basketball court, football field, playing golf, whatever it was. I've just always loved playing sports. Can you tell us the amount of work it has taken to get to the level you're at right now? I would say the work it takes to get to a high level of anything. There's just so much that goes into it, whether it's reps, it's treating your body right. To get to a high level in anything, whether it's singing, dancing, basketball, football, a high level job. All of that takes hard work and it just takes a lot of dedication. And just the amount of hours that you're going to have to put into that if you want to be great at it is, it's crazy. And then, you work your whole life to do something that you want to do. So there's a lot of work that goes into these things, and it's all about repetition and, making sure you're dedicated and doing the right things, to get to that level. The next question is, what was it like winning a national championship? I tell people all the time, it was the most amazing feeling in my life. It was awesome. Something obviously I worked hard for, something my team worked hard for, and obviously it was a team victory. But it felt amazing. It was a great moment. We all worked all year, like I said, my whole life to get to that moment. So to me, honestly, looking at the past champions, past national championships teams, looking at them, I look up to them. You look at how they're built and how they're structured, and you can't believe how good those teams are. So looking at my own team, it almost doesn't feel real looking at the guys on my team because they, I just look at them just like a bunch of friends, that had fun every day. We enjoyed what we were doing. We enjoyed the process. We worked hard, but I don't really even see us as a national championship team. So it's kind of weird for me, and I tell people all the time, I haven't had that moment where it's like, wow, I'm a national champion yet. I haven't rewatched the game, but I know that in the moment it was amazing, like a super amazing feeling for all of us, and I'll cherish that moment for the rest of my life. What advice do I have for elementary students who are listening to this podcast? I have a couple things of advice just for the elementary school kids that are listening. The first thing I would say is, if you want to achieve something, obviously, like I said earlier, you got to put in the time. You got to work hard and just chase your goal relentlessly. Be fearless, be relentless in anything you do. Go all into whatever you love. So if you love something and you want to reach a certain goal, you want to reach a certain height of the thing you love, just chase it relentlessly. Be fearless in what you're doing. Be confident. Just continue to chase that dream. Like I said, relentlessly. And the most important thing I've learned, growing up in my whole life has just been, treat everybody with kindness, treat everybody with respect. That's just the most important thing you'll learn. Growing up, you see a lot of things that go on in schools, and, you just see that if you treat everybody with kindness, with respect, and with love, and treat them, obviously how you would want to be treated. It goes a long way. And that's the most important thing in life is just, show love to everybody and just be kind and respect others. So that is the advice I would give to, young kids that are listening to me. I appreciate you guys, listening to me. And it's been a privilege to talk to you guys. And I hope all you guys have a great day. Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed our special guest for the sports update on this episode. I want to say thank you to Christian for taking time out of his very busy schedule and giving some really great advice to our students who are listening. Whatever they choose to do, I think you gave some great advice on how to accomplish whatever their goals might be. So thank you very much. And here is your final scoop.
Hi, I'm Takeo Madrano in Mr. Kucha's class.
And I'm Leonel in Miss Rios.
Today we are bringing you the third scoop,
Which is a current event.
A DHL cargo plane had to take an emergency landing in Costa Rica. It split in half. No one died.
Did anyone get injured?
No,
How did it split in half?
because there was like a failure going on with the back of it. Like the engine in the back came down and it like started going backwards down.
So did they try to land and then it just broke?
Yeah, basically.
So it was a cargo plane. Is there anything in there that got broke?
Yeah, like almost everything. You want to hear my next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Scientists have spotted the farthest galaxy ever. It may be home to the oldest stars.
Do they know anything about if there's life on there?
No, because they just found it. They could see it through this the what's it called? The big telescope, the big one.
They just saw it. There's nothing extra
Like
about
they
it.
saw it, and it looks like it could be home to the oldest stars.
But that's about it. No
That's about it.
extra.
That's all they really know. On the photo, it was like pinkish, purplish, bluish.
Did you know they have to colorize that themselves?
What?
Whenever you see this beautiful image of the galaxy, it's not actually like that. They're just kind of the certain frequencies of the light. They just turn that into color to make it look this just amazing.
So it doesn't actually look like that in space.
Yeah, basically.
So it's been a lie this whole time.
Yeah.
What? What do you have?
Organizations helping Ukraine.
Okay, tell me about it.
The United Nations Children Fund, or UNICEF for short, is an organization that supports health, nutrition, education, safe drinking water, and families in Ukraine. Their donate page says children are the least responsible for the war in Ukraine, but have suffered from it the most. The UNICEF will make sure that Ukraine's children have safe water, nutrition, healthcare, education, and protection. The UNICEF works for over 190 other countries and territories to save children's life and help them. Death rates of children have dropped by 60% since 1990. Consider donating to UNICEF at www.unicefUSA.org and help the children in need.
So, do you know where where they do it at?
It says United Nation.
So probably just somewhere. It's probably all across.
There's multiple headquarters across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Never specifies on their site. They just say over 190 other countries and territories.
60% though since 1990. The death rate has dropped.
That's really good. That's a lot.
I know. I'm like, that's kind of crazy.
So they've been saving a lot of children in need. They make sure they have food, just make sure that they're safe, not sick.
How do they make clean drinking water?
I mean, there's this whole process of cleaning fresh water to make it even cleaner. And there are, a few years ago, they made, a person made this kind of powder that turns dirty, muddy water.
Wait, Mike Rober, right?
No, he talked about it.
Oh yeah,
That turns it to cleaning water. So maybe they might be using that. They never really specify, but they just do say it's safe.
Where'd you find this off of? What website?
www.unicfusa.org.
I found mine off the Google News, regular Google News.
It's on their about page, telling them what they do and
that was
how you can help.
Is that all you have?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, I have a joke before we leave.
Okay.
It's a dad joke. I visited Switzerland last week. It was okay. The flag's a big plus, though.
The flag.
What do you call a cow laid on the ground?
Asleep.
Ground beef.
Wait, I thought of one. So I have a construction joke,
Okay.
but I'm working on it.
Well, I guess that's it for the 3rd episode. Goodbye. Maybe see you on episode 4. Who knows?
Who knows? We don't.
High five. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to The Village. Be sure to check the podcast website that will be emailed to teachers and all other stakeholders. There is additional content on the website where you can learn more about what we talked about today.
Thanks again to ValueNet in Emporia for the grant that's funding this project and all the students and staff who are making this possible. As always, reach out with questions, comments, ideas, or those catchy jingles to the following email address: village.eagles@usd253.net. And like we say around here, now, to the Eagles in the front and the Eagles in the back, you know what's up. This is where it's at.